don't know, the whole Q movement is honestly still a little foreign to me honestly, it's new information to me that you just mentioned, that it's about doing your own research. Like I didn't even know that. I thought that was just simply being red pilled, not accepting the narrative that's brought to you, finding out the information yourself from the source, and really checking all the different sources and cross-referencing and finding out what the real balance of that is.
On this episode of Just Informed Talk, special guest Adam Krigler sits down for an in-depth interview about his new channel, Adamcast IRL. You guys may know him from previously being on the Timcast IRL podcast with Tim Pool, but we're going to dive into some big subjects. We're going to talk about QAnon, and we're going to talk about how he became a Trump supporter through his entire red pilling, and a whole lot more that you guys are going to want to stick around and check out. And welcome back to another episode of Just Informed Talk. Today, we're joined by a very special guest. He is a self-proclaimed all-around guy, which just means he's an awesome dude, and he has been recently blowing up on YouTube and Twitter with his work with Tim Pool and his own news channel that he just came out with. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Adam Krigler.
My hello there. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. So, Adam, the reason I'm having you on the show today is because I really want to highlight your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe a little while ago you started working with Tim Pool, and that's kind of where I found you. Was you were working on the Timcast IRL.
Yep.
And obviously you've had a long career before that. You've done a lot with your life, which is, we're going to talk a little bit about all of that. But
sure,
when I really noticed you was, it almost was like watching your red pilling was like happening in real time. And it was the most refreshing thing I've seen is to watch you get excited for the research, to dive deep into all of the different subjects, and to really, you were challenging Tim a lot, but you can tell you're a man of your convictions, which I respect. And that's the kind of thing we need more from people in society, to stand up for what they believe in.
Agreed.
And then to do the research and find things out. So talk a little bit about how you came to come on the Timcast show, and what was the process leading up to that, and as far as like your career and what you've done, because I want people to know more about you.
Sure. Yeah. So Tim and I have been friends for, I'd say, about 7 years. We met when we were both living in New York, and we met at a Magic the Gathering shop, actually. And we just kind of randomly connected playing this game, Magic the Gathering. I don't know if you know of it, but
I've heard of it. I've never been able to really play it. It's a very complicated game as far as I know.
Yeah, it takes devotion to get into that game. But we became friends, and he was working, I don't know if he was working at Vice still at the time. He might have left Vice, but he had big aspirations for, his whole career as far as, journalism. And I was a pro skater at the time. I was riding for Arbor skateboards, living in New York. I was actually running a skate school, teaching skateboarding at the time. And we just I think he saw something in me that he tried to get me to start a show actually about 4 years ago. In fact, I moved to Miami to start the show with him when he was working for Fusion in Miami. And we even met the CEO of Fusion, and they were all excited about the show that we were going to do. Never panned out. We just kind of split paths, and he went his way, I went my way. I was a model for a long time. I kind of, at this point, I stopped modeling. I didn't really want it to be my main focus in my life. And I actually really had no idea what my focus was going to be. And this year in January, I was thinking, it's been on my mind a lot lately in my life. I'm in my mid-30s, and, I'm married, and, I'm thinking about having kids, and I really want to prep basically for the future. And I never really had done that before in my life. I'm very fly on the edge of my seat kind of a person. And this year I realized I really need to focus on the future to really prep for a life that I would like my children to have. And one day I woke up and I just decided, I'm like, I'm going to take every opportunity that comes to me. I'm going to really push my career in any direction that feels right. And this is no joke. The very next day, Tim called me and said, "Hey, I know we tried to do the show before. How about we try again? I have this channel, Timcast IRL. I was going to do guests, but maybe you can come on and be, my Brian Redband to Joe Rogan." And I actually didn't even know what that meant at the time, but I guess it was just kind of like his friend that would fill in when there was no guests. And
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
like Eddie Bravo or something. Yeah.
right. So I without hesitation, I said, yes, of course, let's do it. So that was kind of the beginning, and I moved from where I was over to his studio, and we started Timcast IRL. Yep. So
and,
there was
and the
that.
rest is history. And
I
so I
guess so. Yeah.
remember, and the funny thing is, so what happened for me is, I was watching and I kind of saw you and I'm like, who's that guy? And I'm like listening to him because I never really paid too much attention to Tim as much as like I watched a lot of his shows, because he does the news and he does what I do. So sometimes he'd cover something that I've never covered, or he'd cover it in
Right.
a way where I'd be like, oh, that's interesting.
That's a good point.
And he's got it. He definitely, if there's one thing I like about Tim, is that he's got a very unique and intelligent way about him when he dives into a subject. And it's, as a YouTuber, I always watch other YouTubers to see how they do it, so that it
Yeah.
kind of gives me a direction. But one thing that really stood out to me when I started watching you two together, and the dynamic, you, him, and I think Lydia and everyone there, kind of, it was interesting to me, was there was the one day where you made the viral video, right? And what happened was I was watching the cast and you went on that epic MAGA rant where you were like, and I'm voting for Donald Trump. And I was like, and I got goosebumps. I'm getting them here again now. So
Nice.
what I did was, I clipped it and I put it on Twitter, and I think I got like 100,000 or some ridiculous amount of views. And I was like, this guy, he's on to something, like, because he's talking for a large segment of the population who are kind of, they feel kind of put down, and they feel like
Yeah.
common sense
Voiceless.
that they have is not lining up with what they're being told is common sense. So talk about what that moment was like and how you
Sure.
got there through that progression.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I was raised that true character lied under skin color. There's no such thing as judging a book by its cover. You have to read it to see what it's about. And I feel this year, especially, I mean, being on the Timcast IRL show, we weren't going to do politics. It was supposed to be, pop culture, random aliens chatting, whatever, just the opposite of the news, because that's what he does for his main channel. But when COVID hit and the riots were going on, it just spun into a political show, and it forced me to research those kind of things. So I was seeing more and more about how the media would push this narrative that it's all about race, and the police brutality is all about race. And the more I looked at the actual stories and read the actual police reports, and I realized it's not true, and they're trying to get clicks. And we've had different videos where we talk about the actual data that we found from different publications from 2012 onward about how they started pushing these clickbaity words, this racism, and I don't know. There's so many of them I can't think offhand, but it was frustrating to me because my reality was so drastically different from what they were pushing out there. And then I see that the people that only get their news from these places, it was becoming their reality. And that is very frustrating to me because it felt like we were going backwards in time. I'm very logic based, and that's kind of what I talk about in that epic rant, as you said. I like to logically look at things and look at the actual data and look at the actual proof of what's going on. And the proof proved to me that where my mind was at is the right, or at least, the way I looked at it, I was right. I most people aren't racist. Most people are inherently good and want good things for others. And I believe that. No one's going to convince me otherwise, because I believe I look at a person and I always give them the benefit of the doubt until they prove me wrong. I always like to be on the optimistic side of things. And when I'm seeing the news spinning things to just kind of force people to let go of the optimistic side and go, well, the reality is actually this negative world that we live in. It's so negative and terrible. And man, we need to bring the system down. It was just so frustrating because you choose your narrative. You choose that. You choose to believe what you take in and where you ingest whatever information you're taking in. And a lot of these people are getting their political views from fake news, and not necessarily even fake, but clipped and adjusted and taken the context out of things. And that I just I had enough. So that episode, when I had the rant where I was like, you know what, I'm voting for Donald Trump because I looked into his policies, and he actually was doing a lot of things that made sense to me because I never actually looked into his policies. I'll be honest, I was a victim of the media as well. My surroundings, the people. Take what's his name? John Oliver. Do you know his show?
Yes, I'm very aware of John, but I don't watch
Right.
it really anymore. But I think what you're saying speaks to so many people, because I was like you before, where, I went to a very liberal arts college. I voted for Obama twice, and when I got red pilled, which was a little after that, and then became like a Christian and
Hmm.
turned my life over to Christ, it was like the world just changed overnight, and I was like completely disenfranchised. But go on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I realized that I need to speak up for myself. It's the only person that I can speak up for. And I guess I just had enough. I kind of was so fed up with seeing how many people are falling into that narrative. Like John Oliver, he writes his jokes and they're funny if the stuff that he was reporting on was actually true. But it's like he watches mainstream media and makes jokes on the like the skewed truth, and when you know the actual truth, his jokes aren't funny anymore. And it was kind
He
of,
uses the false premises that are created by the fake news that
yes,
President Trump's evil, and
right,
anyone who supports him is this or that. And like you
yeah,
said, I'm in the same boat where it's like I look at content of character. I believe in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., where he said
yes,
it's not about your race, it's about the content of your character. And you said that at the beginning, but it's the truest thing out there. And that's what I get
yeah,
so upset about when they try to label us as all this monolith of evil. It's like
yeah.
it's not true.
I agree. I've lost friends. I just found out that a longtime family friend doesn't want to talk to me anymore because I'm voting for Trump, and it's so sad to me because my character of people that have known me for most of my life, I'm not different than I was last year, than I was 5 years ago. I still wish good on everyone. That nothing changed. All that I'm doing now is voting for the president of the United States because I actually agree with his policies. They it's like the media, I don't necessarily know if it's the Democrats. It does certainly feel this way, but it feels like
Well,
they wanted to create this war.
and
This
I'll say
Yeah,
this though, because when you have like organizations, like we look at like Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and we kind of you look at them deeply, because I know you do this for a living. I try to as well, and you understand that, like, I saw a lot of the build up to this, where I have family members that I haven't talked to in years because they're so lockstep in line. And I've read articles where, like, and a part of their literature would be like, if your family will not agreed to support this movement, X movement, Y movement, whatever, you should
yeah,
disavow them. You should disown them. You should not talk to them until they do. And that's what I think happens with your friends or your family. And
yeah,
I think you're describing that exactly.
yeah. And it's sad. There's this, I don't know where it's from, but they say that the left only follows the left, the right follows everything. The left feels like the right are evil, and the right feels like the left is just misunderstood. And that really sums it up well, because I they do talk like if you're on the right side of things, you're evil, instead of just fully just blindly believing everything they say. Oh, if you're voting for Donald Trump, then you must be a racist now. You must be, anti everyone because that's what he is. And then of course when asked, well, what about him is racist, most people can't even answer that question. because it is just the narrative that the media has spun for years now. Now, why that is, it feels like it's the only chance they have. That, they can't win by classic debates. They need to push the narrative to help, because he is actually a good president. He is doing really good things for America. And the more I look into him, the more I watch him speak, the more I pay attention to politics, the more I actually like the man. Like, I think I don't know if you know, I did a deep dive on his life.
Yeah, we were
Um,
going to just get into that. So talk about because you've done a couple now, I
sure.
think.
Yeah, I have.
And they're really fascinating. I have to admit, 2 hours, I think they usually are, but it's really worth a watch if you want to
Thank you.
go down deep into. It's not like a rabbit hole. It's just like a very fascinating look at all the different aspects of an issue. So you did your
Yeah.
Donald Trump dive. Talk about that.
It was incredible to do. I learned so much about him that was such an interesting, it gives you an interesting viewpoint on it. It very much humanizes him. And I feel like the media has put him such on a high pedestal. I mean, he may be one of the, I don't know, he might be the most famous person on the planet right now. I honestly, I think he is. If you really look at it, he is. He was already famous. Now it was controversial. So I mean, who do you think would be more famous than Donald Trump right now? I can't
I
think
don't
of
know, maybe
anybody.
Pootie Pie.
I mean,
I'm
in
joking, obviously.
well, within a certain generation,
Right,
that's
right.
probably true. But I feel overall, the
No, I think you're 100% right.
President
I was
Trump,
just making a
yeah.
joke. But
So
so yeah, talk about like some
the
interesting
deep
things you
dive,
found in that.
yeah. So listen to this. Did you know that his grandfather died in the first influenza in 1918?
I had heard that. I had heard that. I thought that was,
Yeah. So
interesting.
that blew me away. His grandfather came here from Germany, and he set up the first Trump hotel during the Gold Rush era. This was late 1890s or something. I don't remember the exact date offhand, but it was really cool. He went back to Germany to try to marry his a childhood sweetheart of his, and Germany actually kicked him out. They said you didn't get our permission to leave and go to the Americas, so you can go ahead and get out of here. And he was like, wow, he tried to fight it. The mayor of the town was like, but this is like, he made his riches and he's like bringing them back to us. And the German government were like, nope, he didn't do it under our permission. So he actually, it was an immigrant that was kicked out of his original home, and America took him in again. So through the years, like, his America was the place where he set his new life in motion. So you think about what the American dream is. It's like coming here, starting a business, setting up a future for your family, your children and their children. And he lived the American dream. Unfortunately, he died in the original pandemic, which is, I think, really an incredible piece of information, because people love blaming the president on many deaths that have happened from COVID. And I think that is absolutely ridiculous, to the point of being completely disrespectful, because they're politicizing deaths, number one. And I think that's absolutely horrendous. And then to think that he wasn't trying to do everything that he could do to save human lives is just ridiculous, because he did try. And the Democratic mayors and governors were like, we don't want your help, we can do this without you. And they did that for months. And then now they're spinning it around like all of those deaths are his fault. Really frustrates me, especially when his own grandfather died in a pandemic, the 100 years ago, the last major pandemic that we had to deal with. So and then
That's
you think about,
fascinating. I mean, that's a
yeah, it
fascinating way
is.
to look at it.
And so when his grandfather died, his dad was only 12 years old. So his dad was 12 when he inherited the Trump empire. I mean, it was significantly smaller, and his dad started building sheds and his neighbors, additions on their houses. And then he scaled it up. And then the Great Depression actually hit, and he helped build thousands of homes for many Americans, and helped like propel us out of the Great Depression. And actually, a lot of that was in the New York area. So Trump's family has actually helped build New York to become what it is. So I totally understand his love for New York City. And even in the 70s, when Donald Trump has taken over the business in the early 70s. By the 80s, I mean, New York was a scary place. New York the crime was really bad. Drug use was rampant, and he built the Trump Tower and brought in many, many rich folks. Like, they moved into the Trump Tower and brought a lot of taxes in the city. The crime started going down. He started building more things. So Donald Trump actually had a really big part in the reason New York became as big and touristy and what it has become. I don't think he even gets enough credit for that. So he
Well, I mean,
really
it's like what
changed
what you've just
the
described is
landscape.
like he's his family and him are like the true American dream, and they
Yeah.
came in and they really have been making America great for a long time, and it's
Yep.
it's really impressive. And when you dive deep down on that, you guys, I'll leave links to his channel. We'll talk about that later, but
Thank you.
you got to go watch his content, his deep dive into it. But you also did a deep dive on Karl Marx, which is like
I
such
did.
like a divergence, right? Because you take a leader who's a uniter, who the media is villainized, but we know if
Yeah.
you do the research who he is, and then you take somebody who they've, these Marxist institutions in college and higher education and made into like this folk hero, and you
Yeah.
actually pick that apart. So could you want to talk a little bit about that too?
Sure, but before I do,
Okay, yeah,
there's
finish
one
up on.
one thing about Donald Trump that I thought was incredible. He doesn't drink. He is clear-headed at all times. His brother actually died from alcoholism in the mid '80s, and it was really sad. And his brother told Donald, "Look, don't ever drink, don't ever smoke. This is the worst decision I ever made," and he took that to heart. And so he has this very, and his mother Mary was such a sweetheart. She came from a small little island in Ireland, or Scotland rather, and their town had been ravaged by World War I. So like many of the people, the whole community was shattered. So she came here, and she was actually just a maid. And she went from being a maid coming from this small town in Scotland and met Donald's father, and they created this family. And she cherished who she was and where she came from, and that was one of the biggest things about her. She never forgot where she was, and she always carried herself like, I am now this person, so I'm gonna maintain that about myself. And I just really like Mary. Her name is Mary McLeod. Really great name. But it's really interesting to see the family dynamic, and how his dad was always a businessman, always working. But Donald and the rest of his family were really close at the same time. And I feel like people forget about that side of things. They just look at him as, oh, the businessman. And I didn't even realize until I did the deep dive that he actually had a degree in economics. So he actually knows what he's talking about with the economy, and he's been anyway. I always thought it was really interesting the way his relationship with his brother was really important, and I don't feel like a lot of people give it enough thought. So I just
No, I
wanted to
think
say that.
and honestly, that's an incredible observation. When you watch some of the documentaries that are out there about him, which I've watched a few,
Yeah.
you learn all those things kind of, and you do a great job at going like into much more detail than a lot of these documentaries do. Um, but that's one thing that has always stood out to me, that, you have a really sober minded guy who takes the job very seriously. And that's how he's been so successful. And
Yeah.
that's the success we want for our country at the end of the day. Right. That's why
Yep.
we look to that and say, that's a positive, good thing.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about the Karl Marx dive. We got to just dip
Yeah.
into
Sure.
that. We got to dip
Sure.
into
Let's do
that
it.
water. I don't want to get
Yeah.
too deep
Karl
into it, because
Marx.
I want people to go watch your other shows and go
Yeah. Thank you.
in the full thing. But talk about what stood out to you in that dive.
Well, Karl Marx, he got canceled a lot. That's what I've basically found out. I mean, and really the reason why I wanted to discover who he was and his ideas, he was in a different era. Like, this is the 1900s, he was born in 1818, so he lived for through the 1800, or the 1900s. And that, where he was living, there was still monarch rule, so they didn't have a republic, a democratic republic like America is. So these Marxists, when they're talking about like down with America, down with capitalism, the first thing I can think of is, well, they have no idea what they're talking about economically, as far as what they're asking for. And honestly, I don't think they know what they're asking for. But I wanted to know what ideas that Karl Marx was putting forward. And it's really interesting. By the end of the deep dive, Marx actually realized that he was wrong about a lot of his ideas. And I don't feel like these people that are claiming to be Marxists really understand that side of it, because we are not in the same place as where we were when Karl Marx was doing these ideas. So it feels like he was ahead of his time and behind the times, because he spent so long trying to figure out people's purpose and the balance of having purpose versus a community balance. And I mean, it goes deep as far as understanding our purpose for being humans on this planet nowadays, which is, I feel, a whole nother conversation. But that's what Marx was trying to figure out. And he was shunned everywhere he went. He started, well, there was this group that he joined, and he renamed it the Communist League. And they kicked him out because he eventually said, do you know about the Communist Manifesto?
Yes.
So this is one of his famous things that him and Engels, his friend, wrote together. And by later on in his life, he actually wanted that book to be kind of put away, like put it on the shelf. Let's stop talking about it because it's outdated. And yet these people who are Marxists read this Communist Manifesto and they pass this around like this is part of the answer. And really it was just understanding like the labor force versus the middle class, who are like the middlemen to the elites, which back then the elites were monarchs and people that just their family lineage is what decided who rules, instead of now we have people voting to who rules them. So we're in a completely different place. And then you think about automation and robots and the futures of computing, and even farming is becoming automated. There's in warehouse farms that have fully automated watering systems and feeding systems and everything. So the future is drastically changing. So Marx's ideas, it's interesting how some of them actually are, I don't want to say beneficial, but you can see how he saw the future of life. And honestly, by the end of the deep dive, I felt like I knew less about everything, because they are kind of out there, but at the same time, we haven't really stopped shifting. There's a shift in our society right now with the automation and even the internet, how connected we are, but at the same time, we're so far apart from each other, more so than ever. Like everyone's got their own apartment instead of living in a community and working together for a long time. And that's why humans have lasted and gone as far as they have, because they've worked together. So with the introduction of machines, everything's changing. Go ahead.
When you kind of look at all the ideas, they all kind of get cherry picked, for
Absolutely.
certain reasons. Like,
Yeah.
one of the videos I put on Twitter the other day, and it was this former KGB agent, Yuri Bezmenov, I think.
Yeah, Bezmenov. Yep.
Yeah, he was saying that, he's like explaining how how you destroy a society. And I think it's what they do is they take like a combination of like Marxist ideas that fit their narrative and Maoist
Yep.
ideas that kind of fit their narrative, and they kind of blend it all together into this like mishmash of like, we need an egalitarian society where everyone is contributing and not, there is no rich people, there's no poor people. But what ends up happening is you have a very, in my opinion, very maniacal, manipulative people who use this, idea time over time throughout history to, hold control or to enslave basically a population. And it never really works. We know that. We look at Venezuela, we look at Russia, we look at China, and how even China's now, it's like communism with capitalist characteristics or whatever. So it's like
trying to go back on that too.
Yeah.
And
So
that's the issue. Marx's ideas about his utopian society, the state would run most things. The problem with that is there's always going to be humans that want to take advantage of others and get to the point of I don't have to do anything because I'm the one making the decisions. And like basically Mao got his ideas from Marx. China, they actually worship Marx as like a great glorious idea maker. And and that's the problem. There's always going to be that person that just takes advantage and says, all right, well, you all do all the grunt work. All right, there's not going to be anyone higher than me because someone has to do this, someone has to do this job. Who's going to tell everyone what to do? And that's the problem. And then there's no individual rights, there's no individual property, and that won't fly anymore because we're all the individualistic. That's what makes us human. We're all different, all of us. Every single one of us is different, and
Yeah,
that's
I
the
think
beauty
rugged individuality is kind of like a characteristic of America, like the
and
Wild
freedom.
West and all of that. But it's funny that you said it because yeah, Maoism did come out of Marxism, and then it became this different thing. A great example is if you look at Nepal today,
Okay.
they had before recently they had two different communist parties inside their country. One was a Maoist communist party, and the other was a Marxist communist party. And eventually, in order to overthrow the opposition party, they blended the two parties together. And
Oh.
it's a very if you want to do a deep dive on that would probably be a fun one too. But it's fascinating to see how like you said, it just gets used by people who they play on, I think, a lot of people's good intentions, and they have this idea of like, we're all going to come together and make a utopia, and then
Hmm.
they just use that to kind of manipulate. So if you guys
Yep.
want to learn more about Karl Marx, you should go watch his episode, his deep dive on it, Adam Krigler's deep dive, and check out Adamcast. But okay, so
Yep.
we've touched on that. Now I gotta flip it up here. Let's
Well,
talk about
before we do, let me just say,
yeah, finish your thought. Finish your thought.
my next deep dive is on Yuri Bezmenov. So
Oh,
a
that's
lot of
epic.
people,
'Cause that's going to be
yeah, a lot of people have been asking. Do you know who Edward Griffin is? So you actually posted one of his videos
Oh, really? I may
recently.
have. Sorry.
So it's about it's from 1969. It's kind of an old black and white video of a man talking about communism.
I know now. I know. I didn't know that his name was that off the top of my
Yeah,
head, but I do know that I know the exact video. I watched the full thing, and I posted a little clip out of that.
yeah. So he's going to be on my show next week. I'm very excited to have him on the show.
That's
So I
incredible.
actually have him. He's he's still he runs the Red Pill University. Dude's awesome. So I'm really excited to talk to him about what he's been through as far as dealing with communists and how he sees the communist takeover now. So it's going to be really interesting to have him on.
Well, what an amazing get that is. Okay, so I wanted to kind of switch it up here because there is a topic that I cover have covered quite extensively, and I just want to pick your brain on your thoughts, generally speaking.
Okay.
Have you heard of this QAnon movement? Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, of course. I've heard of it for sure.
And so was that a part of your red pilling? Like when you were doing your research and everything, did you come across a lot of Q stuff and go like, oh, well, that's kind of weird or that's strange? I'm very curious to hear your opinion on that.
Not necessarily. Honestly, not at all. I saw it. It was always there. It was present, but I never really like my research was policies that and things that the president has done, actual like breaking news as it happened, and then seeing how the media spins it or spun it rather. Well, they are still spinning it.
Yeah, and
So
the only reason I say it is because what I think one of the coolest deep dives you could do would be on Q. Because there's so many people out there. I know I have a huge audience. We have 275,000, 76,000 people who are on board with this channel. And
yeah,
I know that there's millions across the world who've come. And it's really a movement about, doing your own research, which is exactly what you're doing. You kind of, whether you know it or not, I think you're indirectly, you're embodying the Q movement by doing this research and by asking these questions and by thinking freely. It's such a refreshing thing, which is why I thought you'd be great to come on the channel to talk about that. Because as we see more censorship and more, the limiting of what's free thought, in our society, especially digitally speaking, I know you have to take consideration that you're, a popular channel and all that. You don't want to mess up certain things. And I get it, because I do the same thing. You have to be able to stay around to be able to talk, or else they'll just throw you in the memory hole. But I just want to get your thought on that, idea, doing maybe a Q deep dive, and because you could debunk so much of what I think the fake news narrative is surrounding it, just by
Yeah.
looking at it kind of objectively, as you're so good at doing.
Well, you're not the first person to ask me to do this. In fact, people have been asking me to do this for a long time, because I did the first deep dive was Nikola Tesla, and I did that in April. So people have known that I like doing deep dive things into, getting to the heart of the matter of whatever subject is at hand. So I I don't know, the whole Q movement is honestly still a little foreign to me, because number one, I haven't really had the time I've been really busy setting up my own business now, really trying to dig back into my music, and while also balancing this daily show that I'm doing, and then having guests on my Saturday show. But honestly, it's new information to me that you just mentioned, that it's about doing your own research. Like I see, I didn't even know that. I thought that was just simply being red pilled. Not accepting the narrative that's brought to you, finding out the information yourself from the source, and really checking all the different sources and cross-referencing and finding out what the real balance of that is. And I guess it goes hand in
And
hand.
you're 100% right. And I think the red pill movement, I'm not going to say, I think it did kind of originate out of Q, because what Q was saying was, all Q did was ask questions and point to articles and factual things and say, hey, what's this about? Research this.
So even that, hold on, let me just question that. You're specifically talking about a person, Q.
Okay, so
You
I'll
said
explain what Q
he.
is, because you're not fully aware.
I'm
So
not.
what QAnon is a group, and this is my best understanding of it, because I've been studying this since about day one. It started in November of 2017 or October of 2017 with an anonymous post on a 8chan board, which we know 8chan then became 8kun, and now that's where we're at today. But it was an anonymous poster who made kind of these wild claims about people being arrested. And what it ended up turning into was this patriotic movement of people who were just coming together on these boards and talking about, like, hey, did you see like Epstein Island? That's weird. We should probably like investigate that. Do you think like there's something going on here, that the Clintons were involved with this Nexium cult? And do you think
Yeah.
it's kind of, and like that kind of stuff? You kind of went down these rabbit holes, but the whole time through, it was this anonymous group, right? And what we're basically told to now is that, and I've basically been able to independently verify this with my sources who are like in the military intelligence, stuff like that. And these are like high-ranking individuals who talk about it, generals. But it's a military intelligence operation to disseminate information to the public around the fake news, because we figured out when President Trump took office, he figured out how bad the fake news was in being
Yeah.
complicit with covering up a lot of the stuff that the people needed to hear and know about. So what we did was, this group posted anonymously for the last 3 years, and they've just literally been pointing people in the direction of, like, it would be like if somebody was giving you advice on what to do deep dives on.
Hmm.
That's all it really came down to. And it was patriots who love their country, who want, who believe in freedom, who believe in equality, who aren't, there's no racism there. I mean, they like to paint it as all these things, but it's literally like, unite, come together. This is your country, love. It's good to be a patriot, and it talked about how, research things like Benghazi and everything that happened. So I think it's like a powerful movement that is so hard to get into, because if you haven't been following it from day one, there's like thousands of posts. So it's
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of information. I've said this before, I could teach like a 3-semester course on QAnon and still probably not cover it all. Right.
Right.
So, but it's a fascinating movement. And when you see the people who are involved with it, the people who follow it, who tend to gravitate to it, there are a lot of MAGA people, but really it's like people across all walks who are like you, who are just logical, wanting to research and feeling like they've been red pilled. So I had to throw it out there, because a lot of my fans, I think, were asking me to ask you that. And I was like, all right, I got to talk to him about that. But
Okay.
I do like that you're kind of open-minded to it. And I, if you ever do a deep dive, I would love to help out in any way I could, and maybe give you some resources and point you into some, people and et cetera. But We'll
Yeah.
save that for time reasons. We're going to move on to other things.
Okay.
I want to talk about your music career because
Sure.
you are a talented musician and you're
Thank you
just
very
trying
much.
to get like kind of open about it. You're playing music. What do you see your future like in that regard?
Well, I started when I moved to New York. I was 19, and I was modeling at the time, but I had left my band. I was a singer in a band in Chicago before I left, and I loved to sing. I loved it so much that when I turned 21, I was missing it so much. I bought myself a guitar. I'm like, I'm gonna learn how to play guitar so I can sing again. And I started really diving into, so my early 20s, I was playing pretty big venues in New York. Joe's Pub is a relatively famous spot that I played. CBGB's, I played there a bunch of times. I actually sold out the night before they closed for good. I played. So it was really awesome to play some of these iconic New York spots before they closed, and I really loved it. I loved being on stage. Seriously, it's an incredible feeling to be on stage and hear other people singing along with your words. It's hard to even describe how amazing that feels. And it's interesting how my life has led me to being on stage again. That's what I feel like when I go live every night, I'm on stage. I'm in front of fans that appreciate me, and it feels so good to feel appreciated. I mean, I feel like everybody can agree that being appreciated is a good feeling. And I think that's what I loved about it. My music is very much my journal. That's how I got through tough situations. That's how I got over breakups and, whatever was stressing me out, even being happy. I've written many songs. I've got 5 or 6 songbooks full of songs. And now that I have this audience and they clearly like my music, and it's incredible that I'm so lucky to be in this situation. I'm like, you know what? I've got to dig into this music again because it's out of all the different things that I've done in my life, this is absolutely my favorite thing that I've done. So, I wrote this new song. I don't even have a name for it yet. That's actually why I played it on my show the other day. I'm like, help me come up with a name for the song, because the song, the words just flew out, and it's essentially, the song is about the truth. It's about, you know what? Let me just read. I'll read the lyrics to you because I really love the lyrics.
You could read it or you could even play it, man. Because
Would
I
you want me to play it?
yeah, play it for our audience. They'll love this.
I'll play. I'll play the song. I got my guitar right here.
Dude, please, because it's such a good song. And then maybe my audience will
Thank you.
give you some suggestions.
Sure, sure. All right, let me grab my guitar here. Let me just
And while you're getting ready, I'll just say to the audience out there, Adam's done some incredible work here, and he's a man of many talents, and it shows in his work. So when you do go watch his stuff, just be sure to give him likes and kind of go engage with his crowd, because that's really important. That's how we kind of prop each other up, because there is big tech. They don't want us to get up there, but go ahead and play when you're ready.
Well, first, before I do, I just want to say thank you for that. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely.
So this song has no name, but I'm gonna play it. Can you hear the guitar?
Yes.
Okay. Life sucks sometimes, but when you realize it's not so bad, just move along. What choice do you have? You choose where your mind spends all its time. When it all comes freely, it's wonderful. Let it all come crashing like an ocean tide. Climb up to top of the mountainside and scream it out. Don't hold it inside. When you find a smile naturally, That's the magic, don't forget it. It'll help you see. In the dark, in the night, when you're trying to find your way and you've lost your sight. When it all comes freely, it's wonderful. Let it all come crashing like an ocean tide. Climb up to the top of the mountainside and scream it out. Don't hold it inside. When it all comes freely, it's wonderful. Let it all come crashing like the ocean tide. Climb up to the top of the mountainside and scream it out. Don't hold it inside.
Yeah, that is like, I got it. So
Thank you.
good. And if you guys like that, that's like a little sample of what you're gonna get if you go check out his channel. But I'm so blessed that you share that song, and I would call that song blessed. I would, but that's just
thank you very much,
because it's a blessing to hear it. Speaking
so what it was about, though, I just want to say, because it kind of rings with what we were talking about. It's about letting the truth out, you know, the raw power of the ocean, like let it hit you, like, you know, let it flow freely because it's beautiful. The truth is always the easiest to remember. It's always the easiest to accept, or not necessarily the easiest to accept, but your life will always be better if that's what you go with. It's the truth that matters the most. And even, you know, and you choose where your mind spends its time. Is kind of like, you know, if you want to spend it on lies, if you want to use that time to, you're just wallowing, you're not moving forward. You have to progress. So it's kind of about moving forward and using the truth to further yourself. So yeah, it just kind of flew out of me, that song. I wrote it on Sunday.
That's epic, man. And thank you for sharing that with our audience. I know they're going to really appreciate it, because it's really great to hear talented people with amazing songs. But okay, so quickly before we wrap this up, because I think we're getting close to that time. I want to go through some questions that came through on Twitter for you. And I'm gonna, you know, there's some of them that are a little like, I'm not gonna ask you that because I think it's kind of crazy and weird, but there's a few things that I thought was cool.
All right.
So let's start here. Let's see. I'm kind of just skimming through them right now. Oh, okay. Here's one. So Venus on Twitter at Alexa Lita asks, ask him what is it that makes him happy and what are his motivations in life? That's a good question.
Great question. What makes me happy? Being free is a very important part of my life. I find it when I am free to do what makes me happy is very important. So, I mean, it sounds very vague when I say that, but it really does apply. I really need to maintain my comfort level and my happiness level, you know. So if there's something in my life that's bringing that down, I need to pinpoint it and understand how it's affecting me. And I gotta say, my wife really helps me break things down and understand things. She's very good at asking why and helping me understand things more. I'm incredibly lucky to have such an amazing partner, and she really is a huge reason why I'm so happy in my life. I got to give it up to my wife, Nishra. She's an incredible person.
Oh, well, you just kind of answered my next question because I have a question on here from Adam Krigler that says, ask him how lucky he feels for having such a wonderful wife. So you kind of answered
Well,
that, which is
yeah.
good. I
Well,
give you
it's like she's directly tied with my happiness, that's for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Great
Yeah,
question, though. Great
I know.
question, Adam.
Great question, Adam. Okay, so hey, I have this is a kind of a weird one, I guess. But what's Adam's favorite firearm caliber? I don't know if you're
Ooh.
a gun guy.
Well, I have shot many times in my life. I've been hunting. It's funny. I'm a fairly famous vegan. That's in many people talk about that, but I've actually hunted. I don't have a favorite caliber. I did shotgun hunting with against quail, and then but I've actually bow hunted before. So I don't know if I have a favorite caliber, but
Your favorite caliber is
yeah.
arrow.
You know what? Maybe it's true. I feel like that would be in if the world went sour, we'll just say that bows and arrows may be useful again, because if civilization falls, who knows if guns will be even prevalent because, manufacturing may not be around anymore. So, we'll go with bow or arrow as my favorite caliber. I like it.
That's awesome. Okay. This one's popped up a lot, and I've actually heard you kind of talk about it before, but I'm going to ask it nonetheless.
Okay.
Why did you leave Timcast IRL?
Well, I'm not going to answer. I'm not going to answer that. But I will say I didn't leave Timcast IRL. So,
Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Um, do you like cats?
of course, I love all animals. And actually, when I went vegan, I wasn't always vegan in my life, but when I went vegan, there was a definitive shift in the way animals um, acted around me. It's almost as if they could smell that I didn't eat meat anymore. And I thought it was really interesting because it was very noticeable. I always love animals. I've had many cats and dogs in my life, even chickens and random animals. My mom has 2 horses right now on her property, and they're amazing animals. And I love cats, but there's something about cats. They act differently around me now. They love me for some reason. Like I've always gotten along with all animals, but when I went vegan, I swear there's this shift in the way that they trust me significantly quicker. I don't really have to convince them that I'm trustworthy. Some animals you do, some are scarred by humans in the past, and you might have to like do some work, but yeah, I guess I embellished on that answer a little bit, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, it was a simple question, but you gave a great answer.
Thank you.
One person here, and I don't know what this means, but it sounds like something I've heard you talk about before. Are you the original man? Is that something you're familiar with?
Well, I don't know. I I mean my name is Adam. Uh,
Okay.
I
Okay.
guess
Oh, I
I
get it.
guess that's up to interpretation of my viewers.
Okay, that's good. Here's
Funny.
a good one. Would you run for office? Because I saw you give that one speech for that was like kind of for the RNC where you kind of did
Yeah.
the thing. So what do you think of that?
I you know, the more I know about who's in power, the more I feel like it's needed. Um, I'm doing a lot to help younger politicians get in their light. I post and share a lot of their stuff. I follow a lot of younger politicians. As far as going for office myself, it's a difficult decision because like look at Donald Trump, for
I was gonna
example.
say you gotta be like, if the
Yeah.
country needs, if it gets bad enough, maybe.
Well, and that's
That's
what
like
he
the
said
Trump
in the
answer.
80s.
Yeah.
In the 80s, during a couple of interviews, he was saying, like, I don't want to do it, but it feels like it's necessary. And I mean, he was a multimillionaire. That guy, he didn't need to be president. He didn't need to have suddenly a huge shift in people hating him because he didn't run as a Democrat. He ran as a Republican and didn't follow their rules. And actually that kind of reminds me of something that it kind of makes sense in the early 80s when he was making a scene in New York. The elites in New York, they didn't like him at all. They looked down on him. They said, "You don't belong here. You're not old. You're not old money. You shouldn't be. You should stay in Queens and Brooklyn making buildings out there." And he was just like, "I don't care what you think. I'm gonna do this because this is what I want to do." And I always loved that about him. And I feel like I share that kind of personality with him. I do what I want to do. And I'm not doing it for other people. I'm doing it because I personally love it and I want it. So there's a part of me that looks at politics, and I do. I'm not going to say I haven't thought about it. I have thought about it, yes. But I also love being a musician. I really love podcasting. It's rather fun, and I want to write an album and I want to tour. As a musician, if I could be a professional musician, I would be so happy. That would be, and my wife is actually an incredible musician. She wrote her first album when she was like 17, and it's an incredible album that I still listen to. And she has a lot to do. Like together, we've got some music that we're working on. I just feel like going into politics, you have to commit 100%. And that's what I do when I do anything. I commit 100% to it. So right now I'm committing 100% to being this YouTube daily show musician. I'm even still trying to figure out what my position is with my show because it's so fresh, and I'm not Tim Pool. I don't necessarily want to follow politics and report on them every day. But once that my eyes are open to the political realm and how important it is to daily life, I can't ever not pay attention to it. So I don't know. It's not off the table. We'll just end it with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if you need to, you will.
Yes, that's
And then
true.
finally, I guess the last question I'll ask from the Twitter post here is
Sure.
pretty cool one that I liked. It was said, have you considered doing your own because I know you just said you're not Timcast, so I'm not trying to put you in that
That's
box.
okay.
And I have watched your videos. There were your video where you kind of explain that, but I thought this was an interesting question. It says, on the ground, have you ever considered doing your own on the ground reporting videos here and abroad to make your bones? I don't know what that means, but like Timcast did in the past, like visiting Hong Kong, Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan, and seeing the
Yeah.
China issues perspective from
Mm.
there.
Absolutely. That without a doubt. I actually, before I even kind of linked up with Tim this year, I thought about doing a show where I would go to a random place at a random time and just walk up to anybody, doesn't matter who it is, and just be like, can I follow you? Can I talk about your life? Can I see who you are? Do you know the word Sonder? Sonder. Have you ever heard that?
I think I know kind of what that means, but you can
Sonder
refresh
is, it's the realization that everybody else has as in-depth and complicated and complex life as you. So it's the thinking of other people and recognize, like it's like pure empathy almost, but it's the realization. It's like looking at someone else and just watching them and realizing that they have incredible depth to their life, and it's that realization that other people are as complex as you are. So I wanted to do something along those lines because I feel like that's part of the reason we're so separated now. This whole racial thing, the whole identity politics and all this. It's uh, Daryl Davis. Do you know who he is? He was a black American who convinced hundreds of KKK members to convert and like burn their robes and let it go because he just talked to them.
Yeah,
He
he
just
also
went out.
wasn't he like recently they were like Black Lives Matter was accusing him of being like a racist or something.
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah, which is
okay.
insane because
I know.
he basically preaches everybody's the same. We all want the same kind of things. And I feel like a show where I just go and talk to the doesn't matter who it is. I feel like the root of everybody is going to feel like you have a desire for everyone to be happy, a desire to be appreciated, like I talked about earlier. And so that's if I'm going to do on the ground reporting, it won't be on I'm here in front of like in the riot of what's happening. It's I want to talk about I'm ever the optimist. I want to be highlighting the positives in life, new science breakthroughs, like going and watching Elon's new rocket land and film it and show me in front of it so I can prove that it's not CGI, because I still have a hard time convincing my brain that it's real because it's so new. I that's the kind of thing I want to do.
I think that's noble, and I think that's awesome. So that's it for the questions there, and I think we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up this interview. But before we do that, I just have to say, first of all, it was a distinct pleasure to have you on my show.
Oh,
I know
thank
that
you.
my audience is really going to enjoy this, so I'm very thankful for that. And
Thank you.
really
Thank you very
quick,
much.
if you would like, I will give you a chance to kind of shout out all your social media and whatever
Sure.
you want, I'll leave links to below.
Excellent. So follow my new channel on YouTube. That's where I'm going to be posting all of my daily shows and my deep dives and my interviews. I have some incredible guests lined up for September. I'm so excited. Corey DeAngelis is going to be here with me on Saturday. Next week, I have Edward Griffin, who is, if you don't know who he is, you will find out. He's an incredible man. Then I have some really, I can't even give you the names of the people that are going to be on my show the following week because they haven't gotten the approval yet. But to say it's very exciting new space news, the future of space travel, and it's very exciting. I can't wait to actually announce who it's going to be. I just can't yet legally. It's an interesting situation, but Adamcast IRL on YouTube. You can find me also at Adam Krigler on absolutely everything. Twitter, I use Twitter a lot, and Parlor, you can find me. Instagram, Adam Krigler on Facebook. I have a fan page. Adamcast IRL has a fan page that someone made for me also. I'm very grateful that I have such amazing fans out there. And adamkrigler.net is actually a website that my wife set up for me. It has all of my skate videos in one place. You can watch my skating videos when I was riding for Arbor and for Bustin' Boards. It has all of my music in one spot. It's a great way. You can actually contact me there. It has an email address and a donate if you want to help support my page. So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate coming on and talking with you.
That's great. You guys check out all that stuff he talked about. And if you wouldn't mind, Adam, we'll do one more thing here at the end. I just want to, if you don't mind, I just want to say a quick prayer for you and your channel and your success, and then we can kind of wrap it up.
Thank you very much.
Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, please guide this strong man in his endeavors. Keep him safe, keep him successful, help him to help others, help him to be a light that shines out in the world, and help others to find his work through you. As we thank you for this day, and we thank you for everything we have, we thank you most of all for our eternal salvation through Jesus Christ our Lord. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. God bless you, sir. I am so rooting for you, and I can't wait to see what's coming up next.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
God bless you. We'll talk again soon.
Sounds good.